Thank you. Thank you for joining us once again, Dave. How
Sure
are
thing.
you?
I'm good. I'm good. How about you?
Oh man, I
Fun,
love this
fun
picture.
afternoon, huh?
Yeah, this is hilarious. We uh we very much appreciate you coming back on. So thank you first of all for that. And here recently in the community, in the Ape Nation community, lots of questions, a little bit of confusion about dark pools. So I was
hmm
hoping to
hmm
like pick your brain about that. And I know you want to talk about some other stuff at the end, but maybe I don't know the best way to structure this. We talked about that article, the comments from the New York Stock Exchange president. Do you want to do that first, or should we first talk about dark pools and then talk about how that does or doesn't relate to the comments?
So yeah, they're hard to disentangle. So it's all kind of look. Market structure is complex, and whenever you talk about when you talk about reforming it, you pull on a thread, and it just kind of is interwoven throughout the whole system. So it what I think the most important thing to understand is with the comments from Stacey Cunningham from the New York Stock Exchange and this idea of what's taking place in dark pools and do they affect prices? I know that's like a big question. So you need to understand the difference, as I was telling you in our messages, and why this is it takes a bit of explanation. You need to understand the difference between pre-trade transparency and post-trade transparency. So pre-trade transparency are the quotes in the market. Okay, and that's where the national best bid and offer is aggregated from. So you have the 15 stock exchanges, and any stock can be quoted within that system. Okay, and so
Mhm.
you can have AMC or GameStop being quoted on every single one of those, where people are posting bids and offers. And normally these are high frequency trading firms. They make up about 90%, I think, or maybe more, of all quotes in the market are high speed trading firms. Okay, so that when you post a quote on a lit exchange, if it's the highest bid across all lit exchanges or the lowest offer across all lit exchanges, that makes it part of what's called the national best bid and offer. That information is communicated on a public market data feed called the Securities Information Processor, the SIP. So the SIP is the golden record, like that's the record of what is officially the price in the market. That's the public data feed, and it shows you the best quotes across the exchanges. So this is all happening before a trade takes place. The quotes are being put into the market, the best ones are aggregated, and you end up with the national best bid and offer. So let's say, GameStop, let's say it's being bid 210 by 211, right? All trades, regardless of whether they're on exchange or in dark pools, have to happen between the national best bid and offer during market hours. So markets are open 9:30 to 4. That's when there's an NBBO. During that time, all trades have to be within the NBBO. They cannot be outside of it. That's
Mhm.
against the law. It's called the order protection rule. Now, on dark pools, you don't see any quotes, right? That's why they're dark. That's the difference. But what you do see is you see trades. So when there's a trade on a dark pool, that's printed on something called the trade report facility. It's like the tape, if you imagine the ticker tape.
Okay.
That's the official tape. It's also part of the Securities Information Processing System. So trades in dark pools are all publicly reported, but no quotes. So when you start talking about the information that is in the market, you have to distinguish between pre-trade information, which is the quoting on exchange, and post-trade information, which is the trades happening on exchange and off exchange. Now, the way a dark pool can impact the prices, again, let's go back to that example of 210 by 211. Okay, so if that's the NBBO and you see a bunch of giant dark pool prints all hitting that offer, all at 211, 211, 211, you know that someone in dark pools is buying like crazy, right? They're
Mhm.
crossing the spread. And so that's going to indicate to the market that there's buying pressure, and that's going to push the quotes up, because it could potentially mean that somebody knows that that price is about to go up, and market makers don't want to be short as the price ticks up, right? So if a bunch of people are buying on the dark pools, that means others are selling to them, right?
Mhm.
There's always someone on the other end of the trade, and those market makers who are really in this for very short term, like tick to tick oscillations, they don't want to be short as something is about to tick up. They want to move their quotes up so that as it ticks up into them.
Okay. Um, so maybe for a little bit of foundation, let me reiterate some of that back to you and like just make sure that we're on the same page.
Sure.
So when you're trading, whenever there's a buyer, there's a seller. Whenever there's a seller, there's a buyer. That's how trades go back and forth. And in this world, we have a lot of venues. Some of them, I think you just referred to 15 different legitimate exchanges, the New York Stock Exchange, the NASDAQ, IEX. Those are all venues. We have
Right.
more venues also called ATSs, alternative trading systems, aka dark pools, and these are not lit. And the main difference with those, so I'm showing like my audience can see this right now. I'm showing them a level 2. So on the level 2, we see the bid, we see the ask, we see the size, and we see a price. So the main difference with the dark pool here is that they're just seeing that price. The buy sitting there, the sell sitting there, they're hidden. Like that's the point of a dark pool, is like
That's
you
right.
can't see any whale buyers, you can't see any whale sellers, and that's all dark pool. And then we also have this unique third option, a non-ATS that's still off exchange, and that's more of the retail wholesaler, the wholesale broker, whatever we want to call them, and that's more of Citadel Securities. So those are like kind of like the big terminology, but like, is it correct to call the umbrella of that? They're just all venues. It's the thing that facilitates connecting a buyer with a seller, and they all have their little advantages of disadvantages of the pre-trade information, the post-trade information, and stuff related to that.
That's right. You got it exactly. And there are reasons for all three. I mean, obviously, exchanges are exchanges. That's what the national market system is composed of. Broker-run ATSs or dark pools are great if you're an asset manager and you want to go buy 1 million shares of AMC. You don't want to put that on the bid because the price is going to skyrocket. You don't want people to know that you're trying to buy that passively. So you're going to post 500,000 shares in Goldman's dark pool. You're going to put 500,000 shares hidden, maybe at IEX, because you can post hidden orders on lit exchanges as well. So you can put iceberg orders. There are all sorts of different order types
Okay.
you can use as a large asset manager to try and build a big position without the market necessarily catching on to the fact that you're trying to do that.
So they can only hide it to a certain point because it's still reported in volume. Like if someone really
Yeah.
did their like Sherlock Holmes detective work, they're gonna find it because like
Oh yeah. Yeah,
it's just
I
in
mean,
the
these
volume.
quantitative systems are looking at the trade feed, trade by trade, every single trade that's happening. They're profiling it. They're understanding, how aggressive was the trade relative to the MBVO. Have we seen this trade size before? Is someone buying 222 shares like over and over and over again because it's in a weird algo? They're seeing, okay, what's the toxicity of each trade? What's the near-term price movement immediately after that trade prints? There are all sorts of algorithms looking at that trade feed very closely.
So very specifically, one thing that I know a lot of my audience is going to be interested in when it comes to the world of failure to delivers and naked shorts, is there any advantage at all for a dark pool?
And no, these things are not connected.
Okay, yeah, because it's just any venue. Like my understanding
Yeah,
was naked shorts deal more with the broker not locating shares, and it doesn't matter where the trade's actually executed.
exactly.
I
That's
think
right.
there's a bit of misinformation of like somehow naked shorts being parked in dark pools, but that's just like maybe not
No.
us being up on terminology of how it's done. It's just a different place where traders and buyers are connected.
Yeah, yeah. When you're talking about shorting, and whether those shorts have a locate or borrow, you're talking about an entirely different set of back office systems. So what I'm describing is usually referred to as the front office. That's where trading takes place. The back office is where trades are cleared, settled, and reconciled. And so that's really completely different.
Okay, so front
Now,
office versus back office.
yeah, the reason that maybe there might be a connection in some people's heads is, for example, let's say you have this internalizer or a wholesaler, and you think that they're amassing a large short position because there's a wave of FOMO and everyone goes to buy GameStop, or everyone on retail goes to buy AMC, right? And so they just start crossing the spread, buying, buying, buying. And you're the market maker and you're selling to them, right? And you're happy to sell to them because you're, presumably there's a spread that they're crossing and you're expecting to make that spread. But if you don't make that spread and it keeps going up because of this buying, and you're just selling, 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 selling all the way up, you are potentially amassing a very large short position. because you're taking the other side of all these trades. That's your agreement with the retail broker, is that you're going to take the other side of that trade. Now, a lot of these the wholesalers are excellent at risk management, and they will tell you, and take this for what it is worth, they will tell you that they are simply there to make the spread and not amass a large short position. Whether that's true or not, I'm not going to, no reason to comment. But the way they describe their business model is that they're there to make the spread, and if it's getting away from them, they're going to go, they're going to go lay off into the lit market, which is why the lit market tends to get this toxic order flow. So again, my whole point there is some level of a nexus, because if a wholesaler is being bombarded with buy interest, they will amass a short position, and then what they do with that short position, that's not connected to the dark pool or the internalization. That's either a back office thing, or they close out the short position in another venue.
Is there any potential tactic involved in buying or selling to create a position on a dark pool and then doing the opposite on a lit market? Is there some tactical advantage of why you would want to do that, of creating a position on a dark pool and then unloading it the opposite way on a lit market in a short time period? Can that influence a stock up or down in a short time period?
Yeah, I mean, it can certainly influence the price. Like I was saying on CNBC yesterday, right? If Citadel and Virtu see together 70% of all AMC or GameStop volume, right? Then, and they're also the ones quoting on exchange, they are seeing, for example, if there's a wave of buying coming, they're seeing that before anyone else.
Okay.
And so that it doesn't have to be like a nefarious way of filtering out from that, right? Like when I say risk management, a lot of that is position management and portfolio management. And so, if I am, like I said, there's this wave of buying coming and I'm getting short, I know that this is problematic, because that wave of buying isn't just coming to me. There will be other places it comes to, and that buying pressure will translate it. You can't keep it off exchange. So the lit quotes will have to adjust. And if I'm the market maker, I know that, and then I can adjust them, because I'm trying to get out of my position, right? I want, I'm now short. I want to buy. I want people to start selling to me. So I'm going to raise the price. I mean, that's how markets work, right? If people won't sell at $10, I'm going to raise it to 11 and try and get them to sell there, because I want to buy and I want to get out of my short position.
Okay. So like one of the common questions is like, does buying/selling on a dark pool impact price? And it kind of sounds like it's yes, but also sometimes no, because in the scenario where there's a hidden whale trying to buy, if by some theoretical chance, statistical chance, there's also a hidden whale trying to sell, well, those would go through and no one would be the wiser. We would see it in trade volume.
You'd
but
see the print.
Yeah,
and that's
we'd see
it.
the print, but it wouldn't
and on a lot of
impact
these
the price.
places, for example, you might see it at a midpoint. And so then you don't even know who the aggressor was. So that can happen. And so large midpoint prints I've seen it both ways. But I would say, generally speaking, because I've tried to measure this kind of thing in other situations, like what does a large midpoint print do? Do you see like follow through after that? And sometimes you do, but often you don't, because it's not clear that there was an aggressor there. But there are other situations in which, like two whales find each other, but one crossed the spread. And again, so you see on the tape that the market was this, when that printed and the trade happened at the offer, that meant that the buyer was willing to cross the spread. But again, it also means there was a seller at that kind of size. So, block trades, which is what we're talking about, which was the original purpose of the dark pool and the broker run ATS. They often don't impact the lit exchange price as much as consistent small trades, which show more, consistent pressure either way, buying or selling.
But last time we were speaking, you kind of said that was the phenomenon we're seeing, is like the initial concept was for block trades to be like a little bit more hidden, not spook the market. But now I think you were saying that now we're actually seeing a lot of relatively smaller trades, like a couple hundred lot sizes on dark pools.
Yes, all the time. I mean, the average trade size here, you give me a second, I can pull it up for last month. I've got some market statistics here. Let's see. So yeah, the average trade size on the top two dark pools last month. So UBS had 20% market share, and Sigma Goldman's dark pool had 10% market share. They both had the same average trade size, 102 shares. So yeah, you know, they're institutional brokers posting large institutional orders in their dark pools, and then the fills that their clients are seeing only average 100 shares. I think that's
So
kind of silly.
yeah, so what's your takeaway from that though? Of like, if there's an immense amount of smaller lot trades, what are they going for there? Like, what is that influence, and what's, like, I guess, the end result?
Well, a big part of the end result is that you still brokers use their dark pools because of fees. That's one of the main reasons. They don't pay to trade in their own dark pool.
Okay.
And so one of the, you know, going back to something you asked before, which is there a strategy where you accumulate a position in one venue and then, you know, offload it in another? Yes. And that can also be very much driven by fee structure. So remember what I said, you pull one thread, you start to get into everything. Yeah. The fee structure of the markets is also extremely complex. There is tiering for certain volume. You know, if you do enough trading on the NYSE, for example, you'll get a much bigger rebate for your passive orders than if you don't do as much. And the fee structure is so complex. I had a great slide on this. There are like thousands of different fee combinations across exchanges, across the 15 exchanges. So the complexity that the fee structure introduces also is almost mind-numbing, and it's become the main thing that exchanges compete on, which is also something that doesn't make much sense.
We're talking about the 15 exchanges. How many dark pools are there roughly?
I usually say around 40. Let me see. It's something like that, yeah.
Roughly. So with that, when we have roughly 40 dark pools, roughly 15 exchanges, and then how many ever like non-ATSs there are, is it good or bad to have so many different venues?
Oh, I think it's very bad. I think this level of this is what we refer to as fragmentation, and
Okay.
the fragmentation in the market is extraordinary and unnecessary. And it's not because it's an optimal outcome for markets. It's because of all of these different parties' business models, and the way that regulators have set up the system. So even just this thing that I referred to before is the order protection rule, which means that if you have a quote on an exchange that's the best quote in the market, you have to route to that exchange. You're not allowed to bypass that quote. So that makes it so that all of these exchanges are viable, because one of them can just start up, offer huge rebates, get orders posted on it, and then everyone has to connect to that exchange. And that's in fact exactly what happened with this exchange called Memex, I think last year or maybe a little before that, but which is owned by Citadel and others. And then you have other things that keep exchanges in business, like market data revenue sharing from that securities information processor. The SIP generates hundreds of millions of dollars of user fees every year, which is split amongst the exchanges, which is a subsidy to exchanges. And in fact, many of them, the biggest exchanges families, make $100 million a year just from that subsidy. It's a very large part of their annual revenue. And then you have, you know, this unfettered ability to create dark pools and ATSs on the part of brokers, but it's not just about the fact that anyone can create one, which is a good thing because it leads to competition, but it's the fact that anyone can execute anything on a dark pool, whereas that's not the case in other countries. So Canada, for example, has something called the dark pool rules. And they are one of the simplest sets of rules in market structure. And what they say is if you want to execute something off exchange, it either has to be a very large order, a block, or it has to receive material price improvement, which means that you have to price improve that order at least a tick if the spread is more than a tick wide, or you have to match it at the midpoint if the spread is just a tick wide. And that's a philosophical rule, and it says that we recognize that having all this off-exchange trading is a bad thing, and therefore we want to set rules up to make it so that more people are executing on exchange. You have to execute on exchange if it's a small order that's not going to be materially price improved. And I think that's a great rule. And in fact, I saw a study, the CEO of a very large high frequency trading firm, who's on Twitter, Alex Gerko, he's the CEO of XTX Markets, and he would, I mean, almost agree with, I'm pretty sure you would agree with almost everything I've said so far. And his firm put out a study showing relative execution costs on exchange with the US versus other developed nations, and we're actually not very good. So we think we have the best markets out there, but in fact, the cost to execute on exchange and the spreads that people see in the US markets, even though they look good, they only look good because we're the most liquid market in the world. If we had the levels of liquidity as others, we would have far worse execution costs. And a big part of that is from fragmentation and from the fact that you can execute anything off exchange without material price improvement.
So the little bit, one of the aspects I get about this is talking about non-ATSs. I understand that Citadel has successfully segmented all of retail trading, and their argument with it is because they've segmented, they could do a better price, and that's their argument. But in a way, it's an upping the competition within dark pools. It's also upping competition on the exchanges. And when they make that argument, you've referred to that argument as being disingenuous. Do you think it's intentional that they know that they're arguing a red herring, or do you think that they're actually like, they truly believe in that argument and they're just kind of running with it and they think that's a better for the market?
Let me, sorry, if you give me a second, I'm just going to read to you a quote from Citadel. The practice of payment for order flow creates serious conflicts of interest and should be banned. Internalization without meaningful price improvement reduces competition, limits price discovery, leads to market fragmentation, and should be banned. That's a quote from Citadel from 15 years ago.
Right before they made their own. What a world we live in.
So do they know that the argument they're making is disingenuous? I mean, yeah, there's documented evidence. And when they say that retail is getting the best price, they're measuring it against the NBBO in the market, which is flawed in many ways. One of the things that Stacey was talking about was that it doesn't include odd lots, and should. So that's one problem. The other reason she's saying that there's not that the NBBO doesn't reflect supply and demand in the market is because if 70% of this is off exchange, it's not reflecting that. And you often hear retail referred to in many different ways, right? Certainly the dumb money is one of them. The term I had heard when I was back in trading was the juicy flow. So the reason is that when a retail investor places an order, they're usually crossing the spread, and they usually don't care what happens to the price of what they're buying or selling over the next 10 seconds, let's say, to pull out a time period, right? They certainly don't care what's about to happen over the next 50 milliseconds. So what that means is that retail order flow is relatively noisy. And so if you want to make your money by buying and selling and capturing the spread, retail order flow is what you want to trade against, because it will often just bounce back and forth between the spread. That's what that means when you hear dumb money or juicy flow versus the smart money or the toxic or informed flow, which knows that the price is about to change and slams the market. Then the market shifts, and that market maker just got hurt because they just were on the wrong side of a price movement. So that's why retail order flow is profitable to trade against. If it were to all come to exchanges versus being segmented by Citadel and Virtu, then hundreds of market makers could compete for that order. Right? And they can make markets tighter and tighter and tighter because they'll be making more and more money. So when I argue for open competition for order flow, and when I argue against internalization, I'm arguing that market makers should make more money,
Hmm.
not the duopoly, but the others, right?
Yeah.
And that leads to more diversity in markets, and it makes markets thicker and more resilient and more stable. It improves liquidity for everyone. So the study that I cited yesterday, which looked at this and said, if all of that retail order flow were directed to markets and market makers made more money and made spreads narrower, how much would those spreads narrow? And the estimate was 25% or more. That's a huge number. That's billions and billions of dollars a year in spread costs that people are paying to keep this duopoly in business.
Wow. Wow. So, but is there a game plan in more like a multi, whatever, a decade or two out? If like obviously they're not dummies in there making these decisions. So if it's detrimental, like are they basically running a system down in the ground that like is like are they biting the hand that feeds them, or is their idea to go to keep the duopoly running and just keep like gutting the retail public?
Yeah, I mean, man, you can print money. I guess you print money as long as you can, right?
Yeah. I mean, it just seems like you're almost like maybe not the loudest ticking time bomb, but like we're heading in that direction. It almost seems like if there's just like this much influence that the duopoly has.
Yeah, I think it's something you find in Wall Street regularly. Is powerful firms making a lot of money, incredibly resistant to changes that seem kind of obvious to a lot of other people.
Wow. So if we get the concept from back to dark pools, if we're understanding the concept of, okay, yeah, I get, I don't even know if I'm necessarily just straight up against dark pools because I get that point of competition. Sometimes you want to play with your cards close to your chest. You don't want someone to see that you're buying a lot or selling a lot. So if that is how it's pitched, and you also brought up fee structure, like sometimes it's just better to execute on a dark pool because you're going to pay less money. Why not? What would you list the top couple like like with those pros, there has to be cons. What would you say are some of the obvious cons of dark pools in our system right now?
Yeah, I think that it's a really good question, and it goes back to what I was talking about in terms of like the counterfactual of Canada, which I think is it's a very good one because of this rule that they have in place. And you just see a couple of dark pools, not a lot, and you just see a little bit of trading. I don't know what the latest number is, but I think it's probably 10% or less. I might be wrong, but it's of that order of magnitude. I haven't looked at it in a while, but that's it when they first put the rules in place, it was something like 30% was off exchange. They put the rules in, it dropped down to like 7 or 8%. And that was what they were trying to do. And so they didn't worry about the costs of doing that because in Canada, just as an aside, it's hard to evaluate absolutely what changes the effect of changes that you're making because you have the US right to the south, and the US, there's a lot of stocks that are interlisted between the two markets, and so flow can just migrate down to the US, and it's problematic for Canada. It puts them in a bad position because it makes it difficult for them to enact changes that they think should be made because of this prisoner's dilemma of the race to the bottom, where if US regulators don't make the same changes, then the flow will move to whoever has found the bottom. So that's problematic. But to get back to it, I think the con is lots of small orders being executed on dark pools is not a good thing, and lots of segmentation and fragmentation is not a good thing. So fewer dark pools where large institutions can find each other make a lot of sense to me. Innovative dark pools make a lot of sense to me. That's, IEX started as a dark pool and then became an exchange. There's another one called Coda that has these like little micro auctions that take place. So they don't actually have what we're used to. If you show that level 2 book, that's called a continuous order book. There are other models which are called periodic auctions or batch auctions. So the continuous order book is the thing that incentivizes speed. The fastest person at that price level gets to the front of the line. Whereas an auction model does it means like, let's say you have an auction every 5 seconds or every hour or something. It means that you disincentivize speed and really incentivize the best prices. And so that the auction model is really interesting. So novel matching models and novel order types and that kind of thing are great. That that a lot of that happens in dark pools before it makes it to a lit exchange. But having so many and having unfettered off-exchange trading, I think that that's damaging markets, and I mean, that's what the studies show is damaging markets. And I think that's what Gary Gensler is talking about too at the SEC.
With you had some comments about 50% of volume going through dark pools, AMC, GME specifically, almost higher to 70%. I was under the impression that there was actually limitations. The fact that it is a dark pool, we kind of limited how much volume could be traded there. Is that not accurate?
Um, there are limitations, I believe, and it's been a while, but I believe that you can't trade more than 5% of a name in an ATS. If you do, you have to post a quote, and that quote becomes protected. So all of the broker-run dark pools have caps to make sure that they don't exceed that because they don't want to post a quote in anything. I don't believe that rule applies to the OTC trading that takes place in internalizers, in the wholesalers.
Interesting. So, and more of a higher level thing right now, if dark pools are more of a front office thing and the concept of naked shorting is more of a back office, and what we're hearing about dark pools, it's clearly it's attached to your world of high frequency trading, the bid here, like we're talking about the spread. But in the retail public, a lot of us got into AMC, GME way lower. We're looking for it to go to the moon. A cent here, a cent there, like it's not going to have the biggest impact on our lives. So to the retail public that's saying that, I'm like, okay, this is an interesting stock market plumbing discussion, but I don't really see how it like impacts the money in my wallet. Like, what would be your response to that of like, no, you should actually still care?
Yeah, I actually think this stuff will add up. I'm actually, so, we started to talk about, one of the things I want to talk about is this new project, Irvin.finance. And one of the things that we would like to try and facilitate there is actually that direct cost question. So in the world of institutional asset management, if I'm buying 1 million shares of something, I want to know that my broker did a good job doing that, or I want to go to a different broker. And so that's called transaction cost analysis, and it's something we've done for institutional asset managers for years now. No one's doing that for retail because you don't have enough data, right, with your individual trades. But if as part of our the feature that we're thinking about in terms of facilitating communities to share data, if everyone could pool their fills together, we could actually then, for retail, figure out what it really costs you, right? So let's say on the one hand, you've got people trading through a broker that just accepts payment for order flow and doesn't offer hardly any price improvement. And on the other hand, you have a broker who doesn't accept payment for order flow and gives everything to their client in price improvement. I believe that over time, that's going to add up. It might only be $20, it might be $100 of difference, but it's different, and it's certainly something that I think is worth measuring because it hasn't been measured yet. So I do think there's a direct cost to understanding some of these things, but there is very much an indirect cost, which is, I know a lot of people who watch you, I assume, have a lot of their money in these stocks. But if you look at retail wealth in general, most retail wealth is held in mutual funds and pension plans. That's where people's retirement savings are. That's where their savings for their kids for college is, right? That's where most wealth is held. And those firms have to transact very large orders. They're the institutional asset managers that I've been talking about. And if the spread is artificially widened by 25% because all these retail orders are siphoned off, that is a real cost to where most of us hold all of our wealth. And so, I think that's a very good reason to care. Maybe not, people who just are holding all their portfolio in AMC and GameStop and such, but maybe your parents are holding their money in other securities like mutual funds and ETFs and that kind of thing. And even if you're not holding everything in a meme stock, it's something I think everyone should care about.
So could you tell us a little bit more about the project you just named of like how you're doing that with the data and like where you want to go with that? I guess that seems pretty interesting.
Yeah, I've only been sort of introduced into this movement and community over the last 2 months, despite sort of watching from the outside for a while, but really kind of getting more into it over the last couple of months. And I've kind of been shocked at the level of data that people have access to. And so when they see things like trades happening outside the NBBO and dark pools, and they think, oh, that means anyone can print anything in a dark pool. There's a reason that they think that's because their data is horrible. And because no one is incentivized to give a retail investor good data, because they're not, data is an afterthought for your broker. They don't really care what kind of data you're seeing. They're not going to put any effort into it. Even the ways that they do data visualization and allow you to do research, that it's some nice feature, but all they care about is getting you to trade and generating those commissions or the payment for order flow, right? They don't care about the quality of the data and tools that they're giving to you. Whereas on the institutional side, we're very much used to working with the best data, extremely clean, extremely accurate, high resolution data, and the best tools and data visualization systems. And so our idea is, let's bring it to retail. And the reason that it hasn't been provided up until now is because people haven't paid for it. And the data costs money. It's not, I think this is maybe a misconception. There are all, like I was explaining before, in terms of complex fee structures, market data is one of the most complex. And so there are all these rules about showing individual users raw data. And that's why the brokers don't want to get involved in that, because they don't want to trip over those rules and have it cost them a lot of money. So we're working with a market data vendor to figure this problem out and to figure out the absolute lowest price point that we can provide the highest quality data. So step one for us is, let's get data and better ways of visualizing that data in the hands of the everyday investor. And then I've also loved to see the DD that is taking place on Reddit, and I think it's cool. I really do. I think there is something really special about this sort of hive mind that is researching something together. And I think there's a way to do it in an even better way, which is to actually have a platform built for that, built for collaborative due diligence and research that can integrate this great data with these good, new ways of visualizing and analyzing, running analytics across the data, and then having multiple people work on the same thing. It doesn't have to be, but at least you can now integrate all of this data and all of these data visualizations on a purpose-built platform for doing financial research, and then publish it out to Reddit and Twitter or whatever, wherever you want to put it, right? And we're not trying to displace those communities in any way. We're just trying to say, let's give people that want to come together the tools to do that, and then facilitate that kind of research. And I think that could bring it, I really think that could really bring it to a new level in terms of accuracy, and in terms of the ability for people to pool their efforts rather than, kind of do this individually.
Talking about the validity of data. So one of the common things I'm using right now for AMC and GME is through a platform called Ortex. I'm looking at shares on loan. That's like I know it's not perfect for the amount of short shares, but it's highly correlated and it's better than nothing. But one of the things I'm getting for feedback from this community is we're now uncovering the fact that prime brokers are the ones kind of setting up naked shorts. They're the ones at fault for it. And then when we're telling them that this data is coming from prime brokers, there's a very obvious and reasonable sense of distrust. So I guess you have comments on that, of the validity of data, and how do we know that they're just not lying to us when they give you the data feed that you're paying for?
Yeah, I mean, when you get into shorting, it's a hard question, and I have seen several different techniques out there for trying to get around that issue, and I'm not really sure how good they are. It's something I'd like to spend more time on, and I just haven't had the time to really deal with it. And so the other side of it is, building an organization like this, building a platform like this would let us devote that kind of time, because in my mind, any data set that would get onto this platform would have to be curated, would have to be reviewed by experts, and would have to be put into context, right? We need to tell you what this data set can say and what it can't say, and make sure that there's sort of full context and understanding around each of these data sets.
Got you. So I guess in the system we're in right now, we'll talk about failure to delivers with prime brokers, and we're getting it. To my understanding, the bit of research I've done is there's a hefty fine if prime brokers are knowingly passing on false information. They could get in a lot of trouble. So just from the fact of them right there, they just don't want to take that on. Like the whole, I guess, game of being a broker is minimal risk and you just are trying to facilitate trades. So for
Right.
that reason, I trust it. But what about like governmental structural issues that at best we always get our failure to delivers 2 weeks late at best?
hmm
Like,
hmm
why can't we get that the next day to know the failure to deliver is at, or like just in general like that? Like, why do those things take so long to get?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I got to say that FINRA is trying to figure this out now. It's sort of an ad hoc system that's been put into place. One type of disclosure on one cycle showing one thing, another type of disclosure on another cycle showing something completely different, and the two can't really be brought together, but people do because they don't understand, again, the context of these data sets. And FINRA has put a notice out there asking for comments exactly on this, and asking, what should this disclosure regime look like? What needs to be disclosed on what timeline? And the industry will always push back because they will worry about things like reverse engineering and other costs associated with more disclosure. And the public needs to be there to push back on that, and needs to push and say, no, we want this. This is important, and here's why. And so that's why I always post those kinds of requests for comment, because the public commenting makes a difference. And when there's popular attention on something, especially as esoteric as market structure, regulators aren't used to that. And so there's no way that they can dismiss it. They do have to pay attention to it when comments are thoughtful and reasoned.
So for things like that, if the retail sends up and they're like, hey, we don't want payment for order flow, we want faster reporting, just generic things of like, hey, we think this is better. But what about things that are, I guess, like more difficult to prove? Like, for example, I know naked shorting is illegal and it's more of like people are finding loopholes or they're doing it accidentally, whatever have you. But what about things of like, there's some people who they feel strongly of the fact that prime brokers are marking short positions as long positions, and then they're just not reporting that, or they're covering up like failures to deliver. It's like you were even saying of buying a bunch of like calls, and they're like, no, 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 we're good. Like, how do we fight that particular fight when we don't even have the data on the situation? We're like, we think this is going on, but just inherently they're messing with the data, so we don't have clarity on it.
Mm. I don't have a good answer for you on that. Unfortunately, I mean, I think when you comment, for example, it's very reasonable to bring this kind of thing up, and especially cite past enforcement cases, of which there are plenty, in which that kind of thing was found. I think that it's an issue that so far has kind of been swept under the rug, and now that there's a lot of attention on it, my hope is that it won't be able to continue to be. And it's the kind of thing that is being continuously brought up to regulators. And honestly, like, public perception matters. So let's say that the regulators completely disagree that there's an issue here, and they think that the public is completely misunderstanding what's happening. They are convinced there's no naked shorting, and they think it's purely PR and perception issue. Even that matters, right? They will care that there is such a fundamental perception issue, which I'm not saying that that's what this is, but even if that's what they think, then they will care, and they will try to figure out how to get the right data out there to try and counter that. And it would hopefully be that in that data you would then be able to prove or disprove this idea and this thesis.
So with perception being so important, like a lot of the, I mean, without naming names, there's very obvious mainstream media characters who like, they look at us, and it's one thing if they're just like, I guess, the retail public, but then I think some are a bit more malicious of saying like, no, what they're doing is manipulation. People like myself deserve to get in trouble with the SEC. And like, I guess from a moral philosophical thing, like I'm doing my job to present data. Do you think like out of the host of issues that the SEC should be looking at, I mean, do you think our group, the Ape Nation group, should even make that laundry list of problems? Like, do you think the retail standing up the way we're doing right now, like, do we deserve a slap on the wrist?
I think that grassroots movements are not going to be a concern. When my interpretation, for example, when Gary Gensler in his testimony talked about social media and market manipulation, my interpretation of that is that he thinks there are nefarious actors trying to manipulate things through Reddit boards. right? The so-called, shills, FUD, spreader, whatever you want to call them. But and of course there are, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, all right. Wall Street loves a pump and dump. It never met one it didn't like.
Yeah.
So you will have bad actors, and so I think that's what he's saying. That if there are examples of malicious or manipulative, concerted, organized efforts, that's a problem, right? If you are amassing a very large long position and then coming out and really going crazy saying, I'm giving you financial advice, you should buy, right? What are you insane, you're not buying, right? And then as it goes up, you're selling into that, right? That's manipulation. There's a difference between manipulation and talking your book. There's nothing more natural on Wall Street than talking your book. Okay, that's if regulators tried to go after people for talking their book, forget about it, right? The whole thing will fall apart. So maybe it's a fine line, but that's my interpretation of what he's talking about, and I wouldn't worry. Provided you have to make it clear you're not a financial advisor, and no one is here, and no one's telling people to do anything. They're presenting information, they're letting everyone make their own judgment, and I think that's very important. And I don't know if you heard when I was on TV yesterday, but they tried to say, oh well, can you say right now that Citadel is manipulating markets? I'm like, no, of course not. I would who would ever say such a thing? I know what kind of legal problems that would bring. You have to be careful, right? Because especially in the media, they're trying to trap you and and all they want is a headline. They don't care if they put you in undue danger, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, I agree with that. In terms of your own commentary, just that article that I sent you about the New York Stock Exchange president, that commentary, now that we have a bit of a more in-depth understanding of dark pools, when I read through this, to me, it was more of a jab at Citadel's non-ATS and not necessarily dark pools. Is that the proper interpretation of this article?
I think so, yeah. I mean, obviously, 9Z wants all dark pools and off-exchange trading to go away, but I think what she's really talking about, especially in those names, that's where you can make the argument. When you have more than half trading off-exchange in a certain name, it's a very cogent argument to say that the MBBO does not reflect supply and demand, and that's a problem.
Interesting. Oh, great. First of all, we really, really appreciate your time. Is there anything
Sure.
else you want to share with the community right now?
No, I would just say go to irvin.finance. We've got a page up there, and we're just trying to see, what people are interested in terms of like the platform that I described before, like what features are important. We really want to engage with the community in every way possible. We're going to crowdfund part of the investment and give people an equity stake. We want this to be a completely community driven effort. And so, the more we hear, the better. And, we're really excited to kind of get this off the ground.
All right, awesome. I will right now show everyone your Twitter. And while I'm bringing that up, could you spell the website just so everyone can actually track it down?
Yeah, Irvin, it's URVIN .finance.
Thank you. And I'm just showing everyone your Twitter so they have a better idea. At DLAUER. That stays
That's right.
Twitter there, just so if you're paying attention, if you need to reach out to him, message him, this is one potential avenue to go. But as always, it was super, super enlightening. Thank you so much for your time. I think the community learned a lot, and enjoy your weekend. Have a good one.
Great. Thanks, Matt. You too.
Bye.
Appreciate it.